Hartford, January 28, 82. My dear Howells, nobody knows better than I that there are times when swearing cannot meet the emergency. How sharply I feel that at this moment. Not a single profane word has issued from my lips this morning. I have not even had the impulse to swear. So wholly ineffectual would swearing have manifestly been in the circumstances. But I will tell you about it. About 3 years ago, a sensitive friend, approaching his revelation cautiously, intimated that the New York Tribune was engaged in a kind of crusade against me. This seemed a higher compliment than I deserved. But no matter, it made me very angry. I asked many questions and gathered in substance this. Since Reid's return from Europe, the Tribune had been flinging sneers and brutalities at me with such persistent frequency as to attract general remark. I was angered, which is just as good an expression, I take it, as hungered. Next, I learned that Osgood, among the rest of the general, was worrying over these constant and pitiless attacks. Next came the testimony of another friend, that the attacks were not merely frequent, but almost daily. Reflect upon that. Almost daily insults for 2 months on a stretch. What would you have done? As for me, I did the thing which was the natural thing for me to do. That is, I set about contriving a plan to accomplish one or the other of two things. 1, force a peace, or 2, get revenge. When I got my plan finished, it pleased me marvelously. It was in 6 or 7 sections, each section to be used in its turn and by itself. The assault to begin at once with number 1, and the rest to follow, one after the other, to keep the communication open while I wrote my biography of Reid. I meant to wind up with this latter great work and then dismiss the subject for good. Well, ever since then, I have worked day and night making notes and collecting and classifying material. I've got collectors at work in England. I went to New York and sat 3 hours taking evidence while a stenographer set it down. As my labors grew, so also grew my fascination. Malice and malignity faded out of me, or maybe I drove them out of me, knowing that a malignant book would hurt nobody but the fool who wrote it. I got thoroughly in love with this work, for I saw that I was going to write a book which the very devils and angels themselves would delight to read, and which would draw disapproval from nobody but the hero of it, and Mrs. Clemens, who was bitter against the whole thing. One part of my plan was so delicious that I had to try my hand on it right away just for the luxury of it. I set about it, and sure enough, it panned out to admiration. I wrote that chapter most carefully, and I couldn't find a fault with it. It was not for the biography, no, it belonged to an immediate and deadlier project. Well, 5 days ago, this thought came into my mind, from Mrs. Clemens's. Wouldn't it be well to make sure that the attacks have been almost daily, and also make sure that their number and character will justify me in doing what I am proposing to do? I at once set a man to work in New York to seek out and copy every unpleasant reference which had been made to me in the Tribune from November 1st to date. On my own part, I began to watch the current numbers, for I had subscribed for the paper. The result arrived from my New York man this morning. Oh, what a pitiable wreck of high hopes! The almost daily assaults for 2 months consist of 1. Adverse criticism of Prince and the Pauper from an enraged idiot in the London Athenaeum. 2. Paragraph from some indignant Englishman in the Pall Mall Gazette who pays me the vast compliment of gravely rebuking some imaginary ass who has set me up in the neighborhood of Rabelais. 3. A remark of the Tribune's about the Montreal dinner, touched with an almost invisible satire. 4. A remark of the Tribune's about refusal of Canadian copyright, not complimentary, but not necessarily malicious. And, of course, adverse criticism, which is not malicious, is a thing which none but fools irritate themselves about. There. That is the prodigious bugaboo in its entirety. Can you conceive of a man's getting himself into a sweat over so diminutive a provocation? I'm sure I can't. What the devil can those friends of mine have been thinking about, to spread these 3 or 4 harmless things out into 2 months of daily sneers and affronts? The whole offense, boiled down, amounts to just this. 1 uncourteous remark of the Tribune about my book, not me, between November 1st and December 20th, and a couple of foreign criticisms of my writings, not me, between November 1st and January 26th. If I can't stand that amount of friction, I certainly need reconstruction. Further boiled down, this vast outpouring of malice amounts to simply this. 1 jest from the Tribune, one can make nothing more serious than that out of it. 1 jest, and that is all. For the foreign criticisms do not count, they being matters of news and proper for publication in anybody's newspapers. And to offset that 1 jest, the Tribune paid me 1 compliment December 23rd by publishing my note declining the New York, New England dinner, while merely in the same breath mentioning that similar letters were read from General Sherman and other men whom we all know to be persons of real consequence. Well, my mountain has brought forth its mouse, and a sufficiently small mouse it is, God knows. And my 3 weeks' hard work have got to go into the ignominious pigeonhole. Confound it, I could have earned $10,000 with infinitely less trouble. However, I shouldn't have done it, for I'm too lazy now in my sere and yellow leaf to be willing to work for anything but love. I kind of envy you people who are permitted for your righteousness' sake to dwell in a boarding house. Not that I should always want to live in one, but I should like the change occasionally from this housekeeping slavery to that wild independence. A life of don't care a damn in a boarding house is what I have asked for in many a secret prayer. I shall come by and require of you what you have offered me there. Yours ever, Mark.